just take your guitar and sell it. They were like communists or something. And I said, no. I said, I want to own things. I want to own records and a record player and a guitar. And they said, no. The only thing you get to own is your guns and your motorcycle. I said, well, I don't know if that's good for me. So I came back here. I had already gotten all kinds of gigs when in high school. I was playing everywhere around here. And I thought, it's a pretty open market. In California, there were millions of musicians, but here there weren't that many. And there had been a big exodus out of Arizona of the musicians in the late 60s. Basically, the redneck cowboy culture here kind of ran them all out. And I said, well, there aren't that many guys to compete with. Maybe I could get some gigs. And I did. Worked a lot. There's a real attitude in Arizona, and I described it once as just look at our wildlife, scorpions and rattlesnakes, and I said, that kind of fits my attitude. I feel like you got to be tough to live here, and I was when I moved here, I was sort of a greaser with short hair, but I heard that the cowboys like to beat up hippies. And they would, here in Scottsdale, they would actually shave their heads with a straight razor if they'd pull up and just shave their head. And I met a guy that went to the hospital from that. And I thought, well, great, I'm going to grow my hair long, and then I can fight cowboys. And there was a whole era of guys here, tough guys. There were actually street gangs in Scottsdale. I thought that was amazing. And there were some pretty tough guys, and we all grew our hair long at the same time. And the cowboys thought we would be these passive hippies. So there were some huge gang fights between long hairs and the cowboys, and we pretty much kicked their butts.
So why be a musician? When did you know that you were going to do this for a career?
There was a moment where show business became my thing, and it was when I was watching Gene Kelly dancing on TV, on a movie, and he was doing a soft shoe, and it was a rhythmic thing, and I don't even think there was music. It was just like doing a drum solo with his feet, and I just thought, wow, look at that rhythm thing. And I stood up and I started doing it, and I was able to do it. I had a rhythm. And I said, that is so cool. And I actually went out in my garage and put salt down so it had some grit. And I just, and I did it for like an hour. And I said, man, I love this, doing a rhythmic thing. And then my mother told me that, and I said, show business, I'm gonna be in show business. And then my mother told me, my father died when I was very young, and he had been a guitar player and actually did a radio show and stuff in South Dakota. And so I figured, and my mother encouraged it. She said, your father would be happy if you played the guitar. And if your parents encourage it, it makes a big difference. So, she got me a guitar. And I just started playing. And the whole life of it, I thought would be fun. The nightclubs and the touring. And, I was just that kind of guy.
So what would you be doing if this didn't work out for you?
Well, I went to mechanic school when I got out of high school. I did graduate high school here in Scottsdale, and then I went to a trade school and got 3 diplomas on automotive mechanics. And that's what I was going to do, and I was just going to play music for fun, but I was a pretty bad mechanic. I had no natural torque, and you kind of have to know how tight things are, and I just wasn't good at it. So that one week I made more money playing music than I did as a mechanic, and I thought, wow, a much easier job, So I just started taking more gigs, and I've been working solid since 72.
Sun's going down, darkness falls all down like rain. I don't live until tomorrow, then I feel no pain.
listening to Blues America. Blues America.
Something's back in the shadow, and it's not something good. And it's watching, and it's waiting, and it's in your neighborhood. It's in every city. It's in every town.
You're listening to Blues America. I'm Drew Verbis, and I'm sitting down with the blues veteran Hans Olson at the Record High Vinyl in Phoenix at 4242 East University Drive. More information is available on our website at bluesamerica.com. So Hans, you're a self-taught musician, but everybody has to have influences, and especially blues and roots artists. So what are some of yours?
Well, the first time I really think I dug music, I didn't know what it was, but it was R&B music on the radio from L.A. and doo-wop stuff, and not really blues, but R&B. And then I had an uncle that played 5 Johnny Cash. He heard me listening to R&B, and he said, "That's not music." And he brought in 5 Johnny Cash albums, and he made me listen to each side one time. So it's like 10 sides I listened to of Johnny Cash, and by the end of that, I said, "Man, I want to do that." And what I didn't realize is it was his more blues-oriented songs that I was attracted to. And right after that, I heard Bob Dylan, and he was doing a lot of old-fashioned blues stuff, and I noticed I liked that. And then when the Rolling Stones came out, I was listening. I realized that my favorite Rolling Stone songs later were Muddy Waters songs. And when I discovered Muddy Waters, that was my very favorite sound of anything I ever did. And I said, I want to learn how to do that. And so then, from that, with John Lee Hooker, Lightning Hopkins, even though I don't do a lot of Lightning Hopkins, his style, his loose style, I really dug. And John Lee and Muddy, those are my 3 big ones.
And of course, Lightning Hopkins, the great, was a great solo artist, and some people would comment that he was difficult to play with in terms of a band and the timing.
Just like me.
I was going to ask you about that. Have you had any difficulties with that?
Yeah, well, it's a matter of... Well, John Lee was just as bad, Muddy, he let the drummers do the thing, but the other 2, John Lee... John Lee would change whenever he wanted to, and it was almost kind of like trying to catch the musicians. It was like a joke that he would do. They'd all think, well, he changed every time right here, so they'd change, and he'd just not change. And then I thought, he's just trying to mess them up. But Lightning Hopkins just had a really weird groove that sped up and slowed down, and I loved that. I said, music, life speeds up and slows down. And I said, it's about the excitement. And when you're getting a tension moment, it speeds up a little bit. And then when you're getting a mellower moment, it should slow down a little bit. It's like music with a drum machine is not music. Because it's life is not, As I once heard the heartbeat, if you listen to the heartbeat, it's not tung, tung, tung. It's tung, 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 tung. It's a hip beat, and it's not straight, So, straight rhythms never excited me. And I've had a lot of drummers, and the bad ones all go, "Oh man, you don't keep a regular groove," and the great ones go, "Man, your groove is so cool." And I said, "See, it's hard to play what I'm playing." And the great drummers got it and went, "Oh, I get this." So it's not about not being able to keep time.
So you knew Brownie McGhee?
I did, yeah. I toured with Brownie after he broke up with Sonny.
How did you meet Brownie?
Actually, I had a producer that was doing he was producing an album for me, and he bought a nightclub or interest in a nightclub in San Francisco, and then they said, you know, do you want to book any acts? And he had used Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee in a movie, The Jerk, by Steve Martin. And so he knew Brownie, and he loved Brownie and Sonny, and he said, yeah, I want to put Hans Olson and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee together. This was at the boarding house in San Francisco. And that night, I met Brownie, and we talked, and he lived in Oakland, just right across the bay. So he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And it just so happened I was staying an extra day. I wasn't leaving until the day after. And I said, nothing. And he said, you want to come over for dinner? And I thought, well, yeah. And I thought it was going to be like his family or something. And I get there, and it's just Brownie. And he was a great cook. And we hung out. Me and Brownie hung out. And got along really good. And it wasn't a few years after that he broke up with Sonny. And he still toured with his drummer, Stive, who had played with him and Sonny. And they decided to get Ed Cherry, which made no sense. He was a jazz bass player. And he had played with Dizzy Gillespie and stuff. And Brownie was good friends with Dizzy Gillespie. But this guy couldn't find the simplicity in what Brownie did, and it was a train wreck. They planned this big tour, and like 2-3 dates into it, Brownie was just freaked out and said, I can't do it by myself, and I can't do it with this guy. And Stive and I had really become good friends, and he said, well, let's try that Hans Olson guy. So I went and joined the tour, and we got along great, and then he retired just right when I was hoping, I could continue with him, but then he decided to retire.
That's pretty cool. What was he like?
He was an ornery old black man that wouldn't let me forget about all the injustice of that the black man had to go through. Wherever we went, he'd go, yeah, right there. They wouldn't let me stay in that hotel, you know. Never forgot a slight that he got, you know. He kept educating me, and I said, I know all this, but he needed to talk about it. I don't think he realized. I think I was the one that told him, there's now laws against that. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you could sue these people. We went to a hotel once just outside of Detroit, and he said, we can't stay there. And I said, yes, we can. And it was a giant place. It was one of those places that had 1,000 rooms, And I said, they always have rooms, these places. And we were really tired, and we were grumpy, and we were on the road. And I said, and I was driving, so I said, no, we're going to stay here. And we pulled in. He said, no, you can't stay here. I said, yes, we can. And I know they got rooms. And he said, well, I'll go in, get the rooms. Then he goes in and comes back out and says, they don't have any rooms. And I knew they did. And I find out later he thought black people couldn't stay there. Yeah. And I said, no. I said, we'll own this hotel. They told us you couldn't stay here because you're black. Yeah. And I explained to him, no, that's against the law now. He was pretty happy about that.
So what about Brownie's playing? Did you learn anything, or did he teach anything about the business?
Not about the business. And his guitar style was so incredible. And I learned a lot of grooves, but not in his style. I complimented what he did. I had to play something different. But I now hear a lot of him and everything I do. I wrote a bunch of songs, and I go, oh, that's a Brownie lick, So he influenced me a lot. It was very funny. The first gig, he was so nervous, and he didn't know if I could do it, And so we was backstage before the gig, and he's slamming down whiskey, and I said, the only thing I said was, Brownie, could you tell me which keys you play in the most? Because, there's so many keys. I said, I don't want to have them all out. If you're only playing in certain keys, I'll put those out front. But I just said, what keys do you play in? And he got really upset, and he goes, I play in all the keys, which he doesn't. And it turns out he only plays in 4 or 5 keys, and I only play in 4 keys. But that was just funny. And then he got really nervous since I asked a question. You know what I mean? There was no discussion about any song.